Good morning, I'm Ed Pozzuoli, CEO of Tripp Scott, and with us today is our real good friend, Jon Hage, the CEO of Charter School USA and Red Apple Education. Jon, welcome.
Thank you, Ed.
Jon, coming back, you run about 100 schools across 5 states. Coming back from COVID, how has that been?
It's been crazy. I think anyone who thinks that it's been easy or that we all had a perfect plan is not saying the whole facts, which is that no one can predict when things come back or when things get better. I will say this though, after the first wave, we were able to really move to a blended virtual learning environment that kept the best of both through our mobile classroom, where kids could actually be at home and feel like they were in the classroom because the classroom came to them. We actually had the teachers in the classes while kids were at home. But now that students have been back, we've really been able to use that technology and what we learned during the first phase of COVID to enhance the classroom instruction going forward. So I actually think that some of the benefits of COVID have allowed us to be more creative, and we're now a pilot for the state of Florida, for example, around these innovative technologies and teaching and learning techniques.
How did you impact on the COVID gap? People are talking about the education gap during COVID. The kids fell behind from an academic achievement standpoint. How did you address that?
The unfortunate part was the students that needed educational opportunities the most, oftentimes poor students, minority students, were actually the ones most impacted negatively by COVID.
Shutdowns.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So what we did is we refocused on those students, all students of course, but doubled down for those students who just were sort of left behind, who didn't necessarily have the support systems at home or the rigor around that environment to stay up with the educational model. So now we've doubled down, providing summer school programs, after school, tutoring, really just addressing those gaps, especially around math, for example. Right. It's really hard to do math on your own. Reading, you can read still, so the reading scores were not quite as down as the math scores, but the good news in it again is we outperformed our competitors and the markets around us. But
traditional public schools.
Yeah, I think we're all in a competitive environment right now, and we should be, to ensure we're doing what's best for students.
And that goes also back to the other question about the competitive marketplace and parents making choices. What's the role? There's a big debate about the role of parents involved in their kids' education. What's your thoughts on that?
It's interesting that that's now a subject, right? Because of COVID in many ways. Parents and how they participate and mask mandate discussions and issues around CRT and all these other things really have drawn parents back into the conversation. But charters were built on the concept that parent is the customer, and that what we're looking is to support a parent's decision as to what's best for their child. And if our school is not the best option, they should have other options. And regardless of income or zip code, a child's interest is what is best for them, not necessarily what's best for a school system, because they happen to live in one zip code that only gives them one educational opportunity. So now parents are starting to recognize more and more and more that they need to be involved, that their voice has to be at that table. And unfortunately, many school districts and systems, not all, but many have really, I think, ignored parents during these hard times and have done it at their disadvantage. If you don't have a parent sitting beside you as an advocate during hard times like this, you're going to make it double hard on yourself and the teacher in the classroom to really get those students where they need to be. So parents are asking and demanding that they have a seat at the table. Thankfully, charters have built their entire model based on that.
So parents do have a vital role.
Absolutely. In fact, we ask parents to volunteer directly involved in the school. We want them involved in the student's education, at home, in school. The parent is the customer. I hate to say it, but many systems see parents as a necessary evil, as something that they have to deal with. It's, we'll just make sure that's a checkout. It's like a political thing. What we really need to know is that parents, it's their children and it's their choice. And so when we design our model, we say, not just what is best for students, but what works for parents, what works for teachers, and understand that we need an environment that helps all of those work collaboratively for the student's best interest.
And so, in coming back from COVID, have there been any special concerns around mental health and the reacclimation of students coming back into school, into a larger social environment?
Yeah, we all know this is happening, right? We see the data. suicides up by 100% in middle school students. Fallout in mental health, numbers that we're still just about to see. And I hate to say this, but when you shut everything down and you put people in small boxes and you create these environments where they're not connected with other people personally, this is bound to happen. And so this is why I appreciate, for example, in Florida, we have a leader in our governor who's actually had a balanced approach towards this of safety and the mental health of students. So in our case, we've been able to mitigate that through getting the students back sooner, but safely, ensuring that the learning environment is designed around not just their academic health, but their social emotional learning health, Ed. And so, it is not just our job in this complex world to just say, hey, what is the math, reading, science scores looking like, and how do we get those back up? We have to also understand, where are our students themselves personally? How are they feeling about their home life and their personal life, and how are they interfacing with their friends? Are they starting to feel like they're not a part of a community, and how can we bring them back in?
Jon, you mentioned parent involvement and charters being focused on parent as a customer, but how do you keep parents engaged and be part of the accountability of what the school is providing to their child?
First, transparency. So instead of trying to hide around COVID and use it as an excuse for why you can't give parents information or keep them involved or access to their students, you have to find safe but yet viable ways that the parent stays engaged. So for example, if a student's at home and they have to be, maybe they're sick, not even with COVID, why can't those teachers be engaged directly with the student while they're still at home and in the classroom? If you use COVID for the benefits of it, not just to say, here's an assignment, we'll see you in 5 days, you finally start to see that the parent has a part of making sure that the student's education continues. So they know what's happening at the school just like the student does. They have access to them. They see what's happening with the teachers. They're part of the solution. And that's what I really think has been a part of our success, is that it's not just a teacher. It's a teacher plus a parent. When you have those two powerful people working together on behalf of students, it really does make the big difference.
And you've seen that as a test scores and the data that you've seen coming out even COVID time.
Yeah, we actually evaluated our engagement levels during COVID because we knew that was in a data point that we could see if the engagement levels were up, then we saw math scores go up. We saw reading scores up. They're directly correlated with each other.
Jon, before we go and before we finish up, what do you see the future of public education? How do you see that?
I actually think, and we always talk about COVID, right? Everything's because of COVID. I think we should make a shirt that says BOC, because of COVID. It's either a benefit or an excuse. The fact is that education is mostly going to benefit in the end from COVID. Why do I say this? Public education needs reform. Oftentimes from inside it won't do it. It won't do it without external pressures. You have to have something bigger than it. Even the politics of it don't allow for a big change. But when parents get engaged and competitions involved and innovation and transparency take place, it starts to create major seismic change. And that's what I'm really hopeful for, is that the future of public education creates a more equitable environment where all students, regardless of background, can come to an environment where they're going to get an excellent education. It's not based on just where they live. And I hate to say this, but income still is the largest determinant of a student's success. And what we really need is a great equal starting line. We can't guarantee outcomes, right? But we can guarantee that if on the front end, every kindergarten, preschooler, everyone coming in gets an excellent educational opportunity, that their life opportunity is exponentially off the charts better. And that ultimately is what we in education should be doing, is delivering the American dream to every single child.
Do you see, as an example, in Virginia, there was a governor's race that just occurred, and the major issue was essentially what and how to execute on public education, and there was a whole discussion as to what level of involvement parents were on. Do you see that issue continuing, I think, politically?
Absolutely. I think we are just seeing the beginning of what is going to be a major issue politically throughout this country, and rightly so, which is that parents, regardless of politics, really in many ways, crossing over red and blue zones to do what's best for their students. Education shouldn't really be a highly political environment. It's become that, but it really should be about what works. And if it works for parents to be engaged, which the data shows without doubt it does. If it works for rigor to happen in classrooms, not just academically, but support for social emotional learning and ensuring that that is a key component. If it works that there's more accountability to officials and politicians around educational results, if it works that there's more choice and opportunities, those things combine to create an enormous benefit for communities. And when parents become engaged politically, like you saw in Virginia, it could change entire international, national, and local races and their outcomes.
And Jon, on that note, I want to thank you so much for the things that you do and the service that you provide to the over nearly 100,000 students that you serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.